We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet. Welcome back to the BraveCo podcast, men. I am with one of my favorite people on the entire planet, and I'm not just saying that. Jonathan Helser, you're a brother in your guys' place in North Carolina. I think the first time I came out there was maybe 2015, maybe 16.
Yeah.
But I came out there and spoke at your guys' school. And I told Lauren once I got there, because you never really know where you're going. I mean, you guys travel all the time. You know,
yeah.
And you don't really know what it's going to be like. And I remember I was like, oh man, I'm going to be staying with them. A little bit nervous. And like day 2, I told Lauren, this is my favorite place I've ever been.
Wow.
In my entire life. It's the place that Lauren and I would want to go to, just to seek God, just to have, friendships. What you and Mel have built is honestly, it's stunning. There's no place like it that I've seen. And,
wow.
And so it's an honor to have you on here. I'm just going to talk really quick. I'm going to introduce you, and then you can, whatever I don't get right, you can clean up. But, you guys have just a phenomenal ministry, the 18-inch journey, which is the journey from your head to your heart. It's the most courageous journey that a person can ever take. And you guys have a discipleship school that's 15 years old, I believe. Is that true?
Yeah, we just finished the 15th year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And I'm going to ask you about that in a little bit, but you guys have that school that's so unique and really incredible. And then, but you also have the Cageless Birds. That is like your worship. It's your worship and it's your goods and stuff.
Yep. Lots of creativity.
Yeah, you guys are just so creative. And so if people aren't familiar, here's what I'd say. If you haven't gone and exposed yourself to Jonathan and Melissa's ministry, what you guys are doing, like the pure connection to the heart of God comes through everything you're doing, from your creative stuff to the discipleship stuff to the music. It's just, you guys are masters at getting people connected to the heart of God and then connected to themselves. And so it's stunning. You guys also sell coffee. You roast your own coffee and sell coffee and do stuff like that. So for all of you coffee snobs out there, go get yourself some. But Johnny, thank you so much for coming on here, man. And I'm so excited to dive into this today. Yeah.
And our coffee is so good that when you came to the land, you actually drank coffee, and we sent your wife Lauren a photo. She said he never drinks coffee, and you actually drank our coffee. So it's miracle status coffee. So,
what was so cool when I came out there, 2015, I believe was the first time. Those are some beautiful and tough years in my life. I was working through some anxiety and like coming to your guys' place literally was a godsend. Just being on the land and being a part of the community, because, and I'm going to have you share what you guys do, but being a part of the community, because you guys don't just do, like, there's a lot of places that I go where it's like they have church services or some discipleship stuff, but you guys do family and community. Like, just talk a little bit about the vision behind the 18-inch journey, and then how it kind of plays out and works out. And because I really want people to get an idea of family. That's where we're headed. So you can kind of explain that a little bit.
Yeah, me and Melissa met at a ministry school in the late 90s. We got married in 2000, and my parents had already got this piece of property here in the heart of North Carolina. We're out in the rolling hills in the woods. And by the time me and Melissa got married, they had built 2 small cabins on the land. And me and Melissa were coming out of ministry school, just ready to bring heaven to earth and do any kind of ministry. And my parents were like, what if you guys hosted a summer camp this summer? We'll cheer you guys on. And we're like, yes, we'll do it. So first year of marriage, we hosted a high school summer camp, had 20 high school kids, and we watched them have a beautiful collision with the love of God. And our whole passion at that summer camp was, because I would go to summer camp every summer and get saved when I was a teenager. I would, go to summer camp, yes, give my life to Jesus.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to be the best Christian ever. And then I would have a terrible year and have to go to camp and get saved again. And I just did that cycle all through middle school and high school. But our whole passion at that first high school camp was, how can we help these young people not just have a 1-week experience, but how can we teach them to dig a well where they can have a year-long friendship with God? Mm-hmm. Again, we're dreaming big. It's only 1 week, but we're like, we don't want you to just drink from our well, but we want you to dig a well. And so at that first high school camp, it was like the acorn or the mustard seed of what the tree that the school is now was planted. And we saw it happen, not in every high school kid, but we saw a whole handful of high school kids that at the camp, they were like, wait, I'm born for friendship with God, and I want to take the time to dig the well in my heart. And so we saw these kids for about 7 years. We did that camp, and we were getting to our late 20s at that point, and our hearts started burning for discipleship, to actually have a longer season to pour in, and to really, at that point, we're only in our late 20s, so we were seeing all these college-age students go into the pressure system of the world and get crushed by the pressure system of the world.
Yeah.
And so our dream was, what if we could start a discipleship school that could teach them, like Daniel had a pressure system in his heart that was regulated, that was stronger than the pressure system of Babylon. And he was able to be in the pressure system of the world, but he could stay connected to a different source. And he actually could overcome and thrive and be more than a conqueror in Babylon. And so we started our school for college age students, like 18 to 22-year-olds. This was 2008. And we actually invited some of our favorite high school campers who were now in college to come try the school out. We didn't know if it would work, but we're like, come, you're going to live on the land for an entire summer, and we're going to do life together. And discipleship won't just be in a classroom, it'll be around a table. And our greatest inspiration was the way Jesus did discipleship. One of our values is that we're found by a father, but we're formed in a family. And so we wanted it to be that life-on-life discipleship that happens. And so that was our first school, 8 students, and now we're 15 years in. We'll now have about 90 staff and students that'll be on the land. And the students range now from 21 to 30 years old. So anyone, we just love that 20s, that age of formation that happens in your 20s. And it really is a school for identity. It's a school for your heart. It is a deep dive into discipleship. And it's beautiful, challenging, and I feel like I've done the 18-inch journey 15 years, and every year it goes deeper. And so that's it in a quick little nutshell.
Well, what I love is, and this will launch us in, but what I love is a lot of your program is based around people actually producing stuff. And so it's like, there's a lot of programs where you go and you listen and you hear and you do homework and stuff. But I mean, like I have several friends that have gone out there, and I mean, they're weed whacking, they're gardening.
Yeah.
They're like, I mean, the students are involved in helping to actually take care of and build and cook and clean and things like that. And can you talk a little bit about like the value of that and why you guys started that?
Yeah. Well, information is not transformation. If information was transformation, we're the like most informed. Hey, my wife's on the phone there. There's my bride. But on this phone, I can have access to information as much as I want, more than I want.
Yeah.
But it's not transformation. And so just sitting in a classroom for hours and hours and hours, and it just going in our head, but never descending down into our heart, into our belief systems, into the core of who we are. So we have like engineered this school where we do have moments in a classroom where you're going to learn, but then we want to get you into the garden of your heart, and actually get messy. I love that God's first interaction with us, he's got dirt in the crevices of his hands. He's got mud under his fingernails, and he's got dirt on his lips because he's just kissed us. He's just literally formed us out of mud. And I believe that discipleship is this messy, beautiful, redemption, glorious thing that happens as we dare to get honest and messy with God. So say we're teaching in the classroom one week about the fear of failure, and then later that day you're going to be in a pottery class where you might be, I mean, we've had doctors, we've had lawyers, we've had all kinds of people from every walk of life do the school, and we all get them into some type of creative collective. And so you get someone down there who's never done pottery in their life. In the classroom, they're like, I don't deal with the fear of failure. Like, I've taken my notes. I know that God loves me. Perfect love casts out all fear. I have no fear.
Yeah.
And then they get down there and they become a child again. They become a student again. They go back to the garden and they get messy with God, and they're trying to center clay on a wheel, and they fail. It's a beautiful failure right there in their hands, and they manifest all their fear of failure, and it's like it's a reckoning of what they really believe. So we kind of use the arts as this like secret back door to get into their hearts. And you know, we have a passion to see more and more men come to our school. We have, like, when we open up our application, we'll have hundreds of girls will like be waiting to apply. Some of the men get scared to do our school because they see all the creativity that happens. But I tell men, I'm like, you got to be a man to do the school, because we are going to dig into your heart, and we're doing the arts not to have this crafty little school. It's like to make a courageous journey into what you believe about yourself and what you really believe about God. And we're starting a woodworking class this year, so where men are going to be making axe handles, and we're going to be making we're going to take the wood from the land. So that's why we use creativity, is really just to get us out of information and for us to start getting brutally honest with God about what we believe.
You know, it's such a challenging thing. As a man, I think one of the scariest things to experience as a man is the feeling of being completely powerless, right? Like, I don't know what to do in life, and I don't know what I should be doing in life, and I don't know how to get to where I think I should be in life. And I, you know, it's no secret that we live in just one of the most fatherless generations in history, where our fathers just aren't at home. And then on top of that, like, it's one of the most perverted generations in history and I'm not just talking about sexual perversion, although I am, but just perversion in general. Like, this is what you should want. This is who you should be. This is where your appetite and your energy and effort should be pointed, whether it's money or women and the average man today, man, I don't know how the average man is even functioning today because of the distorted, twisted message. One, that a majority of men are being sent, which is, man, if dad's not home and present with you, that's really challenging. And then on top of that, you have this message coming from social media and the world that's like, you got to be somebody. Like, you got to earn $1 million, and you got to get a wife with a trophy wife, and you need to be an influencer, you know? And so it's really crazy. Like, men are just suffering they're just suffering so bad. But when I look around, like, so many guys are afraid to stop and really take a look at themselves and go, like, how do I get out of this mess? How do I really move forward in my life? And I think that that's a lot of the reason why you don't have as many men, signing up to do a school. Like, women, for the most part, aren't like, I don't want to see what's going on inside of me because I'm afraid that I'm going to be embarrassed, or I'm afraid of crying, but as soon as you start to take a man down that journey, he's like, I don't want to go down this journey. It just feels girly and powerless. And what do you feel like? Like, I know, you have a lot of men that you guys have walked through this process, like Jake and just all these guys that you've ran with for a really long time. I mean, literally they were like 17, 18 when they came on staff. Like, what do you feel like some of the real secrets to guys getting their heart back and getting well and overcoming that fear barrier?
I love Dallas Willard says that God's more concerned in who we become than in what we do. God's more concerned in who we become than in what we do. And like you were saying, like, we've made the pressure system of the world that we're in right now has made an idol over what we do, which is what idols were. It was what our hands could make. And it's like, are we worshiping the God we're making with our hands, or are we daring to worship the God who made us with his hands? And so I think that when that truth sets in for a man in his 20s, it actually liberates him. That it's like, wait a second, I can step off the treadmill and I can turn away from this seduction of success. And I actually am worth taking the time to sink my roots deep before I have to bear fruit. And I love that Jesus, we have no idea what he did in his 20s. We know he was a carpenter, but he was hidden. His roots were going deeper and deeper and deeper. So his branches could hold the weight of the fruit of what was going to come out of his life. And we worship instant success in America, but I watch over and over again these trees that look like they could hold the weight of this fruit, but they have no roots. So I think to challenge the men that come to press the pause button, to slow down, to dare to take a season like Jesus and sink their roots deep in the unseen. Jake would be an amazing example. He did our second school when he was 17 years old. He's 32 years old now. He married like one of the queens of our community here, an amazing woman. He has 2 children now. But he did come here as a boy, and he has become a man. And he's done the work to become a man. And he's still on the journey. I'm still on the journey. I'm in my mid-40s. I'm still on the journey of learning that. But I think teaching the guys to slow down. And then I just love that we have this picture of a man in King David, who was a man that had hands that were so strong they could bend a bow of bronze, and he could pick up a giant sword as a teenager and cut the head off a giant. But he also had the sensitivity to pick up a harp and play it in such a way it caused demons to flee from kings. And he was a lover and a warrior, and he was a man that was aware of what was happening inside of his heart. And you read these 150 well-worn paths he gave us in the Psalms, and you find every human emotion bleeding out of David's heart before God, because he was a man fully alive before God. And he was messy, like I said, we were in God's hands in Eden. Like David was messy, but he was a man that was alive. And he also has that same path. Like, he doesn't actually become that king until his 30s. And he has this whole season of actually suffering, being chased by his father-in-law. I mean, that's a serious family issues.
So wild.
But it was causing his roots to go deep. And who is he going to become more than what is he going to do? And so those are a few things that we've learned in engaging the hearts of men on the land.
I think what's so interesting is so many men want to feel confident in whatever their ability as a man, to protect and provide and promote and all that stuff. But in order to be really confident in your ability, like, you have to be competent. Like, you have to do stuff. You actually have to. There was a quote the other day that I saw. I'm going to ruin it, but a guy was saying, like, you can't just stand in the mirror and proclaim who you are and feel like that somehow is just going to, like, magically instill in you the capacity to do those things. Like,
wow,
you have to have both. Like, you need to be able to look in the mirror and go, like, you can do it, and then you have to go out there and do it, right? Like, you have to go and actually try and fail and research and figure out why you tried and try again and do stuff. And one of the major aspects of missing your father and not having a dad around is that you don't have anyone that's actually going, come and do this with me. Like, when I look at Jesus and his discipleship model, right? Jesus calls the disciples, and for a long time, the disciples just follow him around while they watch him do stuff.
Yes. Yep.
And then phase 2 is like, they do stuff with him, right? Like, they're doing it and he's doing it. He's doing some miracles and they're a part of it. And they're getting their butts handed to them as well. Like, they got a boy that they can't cast a demon out of, and Jesus has to go and do it. And they're learning all the stuff, right? And then finally they get to this phase, the final phase, where he's like, you go and do it. You've been with me, you've seen me, we've done it together. And then now you go and do it. And by the way, like, you're going to do stuff that I never did. You're going to do greater stuff than that. You're going to, like, you have all of my strength. And to me, like, when I look at the men in our world today, that's one of the biggest pieces that's missing, is who walked with you and taught you and pulled you out of your comfort zone, right? And gave you accountability, which was account for your ability, right? Not like your sin, but like holding you accountable to the highest level of, like, I remember my dad when I was 13 years old, I didn't want to go to church anymore. I didn't want to go to youth group. And I told him, like, youth group's so dumb. I don't want to go to it. And there's homeless people that come in and the worship sucks. That's literally what I was saying to him. And he said, oh, son, it sounds like you're going to youth group for yourself. And I was like, I think I am, Dad. I thought he was saying, like, it's good to go to youth group for yourself. I'm 13,
Yeah.
And he said, son, going to youth group for yourself is the lowest level of living as a believer. Like, we don't go to church for what we can get. We go for what we can give. And I was like so cut to the core, right? I felt so selfish and I felt so little. And then my dad looked at me and he said, son, look at me. People need what you have. They need what you have. When you go to youth group, I want you to find somebody and sit down and listen to them. You're a great counselor. You have wisdom for people. Like my dad, right? My dad did that to me. He gave that to me. He gave me the gift of counseling. He literally, he identified it and he pushed it forward in my life. He promoted it. And what I love about what you guys are doing, which is a model for men and women, but we're talking about men today. What I love what you guys are doing is you're pulling guys in, right? And they have this place where they can belong, because you need to belong.
Yes.
And you need to belong before you ever behave. You need to know that you're loved and you're cared for, which is what your guys' community does, right? Like, come eat dinner with us, worship with us, hang out. Oh, but by the way, now you're going to produce. And in the production, you're going to start to find out things about yourself. You're going to start to find like you're going to build some confidence that you can.
Yep.
And you're going to find these places where you can't.
Yep.
And you're going to need a community around you to lean on, to pull the strength, to pour into you. And
real quick, when you're saying produce, I just want to, when you're saying produce, you know our school, but I just want the guys that are listening, what we're saying is that we're not just going to have you sit in a classroom and listen to our message, because our dream is that, and the kingdom dream is that they become overcomers. And you overcome by the word of your story, by the word of your testimony. And so in the school, it's like, you're not just going to listen to us. We're going to put a pen in your hand later today, and you're going to write something. We're going to put clay in your hands, and you're going to form something. We're going to put you in a community, and you're going to not just be at the table as a consumer. You're going to go to the table as a contributor and actually do something and find out what's actually inside of your heart. Again, it's not like produce, like you're on an assembly line. You have to produce a car or produce a product, but it's like it's the discipleship moment that Jesus had when he said, "Who do you say I am?" Yeah. And Peter had to produce something in that moment. Like, he didn't stay silent. He produced the words, "You're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God."
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, "Yes, now that you know who I am, let me introduce you to your true self, Peter. You're a rock, and I'm giving you authority, and I'm giving you keys." But that came from Peter moving beyond information, moving to an intimate moment of actually him putting in his own words who God was for him. And then it created this moment for God to pour back into him. So that's a huge part of what the school is. And and again, this is like, I want it to be so much more than school. We just want to do what I think kingdom life is meant to be. And we're meant to have friends and men and mentors and people in our life that do what your dad did for you in that moment, who love you enough to say, "This is who you're born to be, Jason." And so we arrange the whole school. Like, you're going to have a one-on-one pastor that is in your stuff the whole school. And that's what Jake is now. Like, Jake is like one of the Jedis as a one-on-one pastor. I just saw him the other day sitting in the wood shop with one of the men. And I know he's doing what your dad did to you. He's like, I believe true spiritual fathers and mentors have eyes to see the kings and the shepherd boys. They have eyes to see the harvest and the seed. I love that about your dad. Like, he has those prophetic eyes to see like the army inside of the dry bones. And I went by the wood shop and I saw Jake down there. He's fighting right now for one of our interns' hearts. And I know he's speaking in, "This is who you're made to be. This is who you're made to be." Like, and calling it out of him. So just wanted to tag in on some of those thoughts.
Yeah, it's incredible. Our worlds overlap because you guys do discipleship, and everything we do is discipleship. I mean, discipleship to me it is the model. And part of why I think growing up, I grew up in the church, you grew up in the church, and I grew up in the church for my whole entire life. And I love the church. I think it's just so beautiful. But one of the things that I saw was really lacking, especially for men, we had the Promise Keepers movement, which again, I think is an incredible movement that happened. Yep. Probably both our dads were touched. I know my dad was. I'm just assuming that your dad, he was impacted because of the influence. Millions of men across the country in the 90s and early 2000s were just flooding to stadiums and getting, just having these mountaintop moments and these experiences with God that were just so impactful. But at the end of the day, they come back home and there was no real follow-up, which I'm not saying Promise Keepers did something wrong. I'm just saying, without that discipleship follow-up, without the real, like, okay, now what do I do now that I've had this incredible heart moment with God, this connect? What do I do? What's next? Where do I go from here? And so when we were starting to build out BraveCo, it was like, well, we can't just do conferences, because I've done conferences my whole entire life, which is one of the frustrations being in the church world, is like, I watch people go from conference to conference to conference. but nothing actually taking root in their life.
Yep.
And being cultivated, a lot of stuff being stirred, but not a lot of stuff being nurtured and cultivated from that. And we have this phrase here that great men aren't born, they're made, they're built, you know.
Come on.
Yeah. And I think that it's such a process to go from, you know, where you are right now to what God has for you, the fullness of what God has for you. And what I love that you guys have modeled for years and have done is you guys have spent so much time getting inside people's lives, getting in their story and helping them walk all the way into freedom. You know, can you talk just a little bit, Johnny, about, for your men that are there, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge that they face when they first enter into that?
Yeah. I was thinking about the moment where David is standing in front of Goliath, and Goliath has paralyzed an army with fear. And I think it's a bit of a picture of what you were talking about, the epidemic we're in right now with men. It's like this giant of intimidation, this giant of lust, this giant of what the world calls success has like paralyzed a whole army of men. And at that moment, David shows up, and he's had the oil poured on his head. He's had the affirmation of heaven poured over him, and it's made the 18-inch journey from his head down into his heart. Like he has, the oil is dripped down inside of him, where he knows, like, I am chosen by God. So he shows up on the battlefield knowing who God is, knowing who he is, and then also knowing who his enemy is. And he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine to defile the armies of the living God? And then when he's standing before King Saul, he says, I slayed a lion and a bear with my own bare hands. I grabbed it by the hair, and God protected me there. And he says to Saul, he says, when he calls himself, he says, I am your servant. So he says, this is who I am, this is who God is, and this is who my enemy is. And I think those are the three core questions that a lot of our discipleship is formed around, is being able to let God name you, learning how to name who God is for you, and then finding out who is the enemy of your soul. And what I mean by that is, like, what are the lies that have come at you your whole life that have paralyzed you and held back who you're born to be as a king and as a man? And just for me personally, I can look back, and this lie that I'm not enough has probably been one of the biggest ones that's come at me.
Yeah.
And the way I remember being a teenager just absolutely petrified to ever speak in public. And when I really got saved and followed Jesus, that lie didn't go away. Like, it actually started, and it started intensifying. And I mean, I remember, like, I was in ministry school and I'm reading the stuff and I'm reading the books and doing everything. But man, if I got called to speak in public, like, I mean, absolute anxiety and dread and fear. And I still feel it at times. I'm more free from it than I've ever been, but I've done the work to go down and go, oh man, this comes from this place of, I don't have what it takes. I'm not enough. And learning to name that lie, like David, and said, who are you? And then also, God, who do you want to be for me in that? Does that make sense? And
yeah, it's so powerful, right? Keep going. Sorry, I don't want to stop.
No, that's fine. But that's just a huge part of, like, that's the heart work that we want the men to do. And what you're going to do if you come do the school is we're going to go down and find out what are the lies that have come against you, and who does God want to be for you in that?
It's really a journey that every man has to take. is that journey of like when I look at Jesus, he's getting ready to do his ministry, right? And he goes and he gets baptized by John, and he gets the Father comes out of heaven, and the voice of God comes out of heaven and says, "This is my son," right? Like he gets this identity, has this massive identity moment before he ever does the works. Like he has this moment of affirmation. God says, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." And then it's so strategic of God to do this, but he gets led right into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit to go have this showdown with the enemy. And Jesus in the middle of fasting, and it's just so crazy, right? Like he has a showdown with the devil, and you know this, but just for everyone listening, the enemy's like, "Hey, if you are the Son of God, like whatever, do all these things, cast yourself off, let the angels catch you, turn this stones into bread, like perform, do these acts, perform." And Jesus, he just completely works the devil over, and he just, you're not supposed to tempt God, you're not. And he's like, "I don't have to perform for you. I don't have to jump through your hoops. Like, I know who I am. I am the Son of Man." And it's just such it's such the perfect setup, because without really understanding who you are, how God's made you to be, those lies that we're born with, not even just born with, those lies that we accrue throughout our life, just begin to reduce who God's made us to be into, like, we get put in these, I'm not good enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not strong enough. But when you can start to understand who God is and who he's made you to be, the sky is the limit. And we watch so many guys go through that process, right? Of we did a 5-day challenge last year, which is just like this free, challenge, live challenge that guys could jump on. And we had like 3,000 guys on there. And it was really cool. We take one night every single week for 5 days. And we just go after like breaking cycles in your life. And one of the last nights I did this message on breaking off the lies that God's called you. And man, it's crazy. Like the guys, I talked about how, right, like you have Saul that gets transformed into Paul. You have, Simon that becomes Peter. I mean, there's just through the Bible, right? You have Jacob into Israel. You have all these different times when God's like, you're no longer the liar. Like you are, gives you a new name. And so at the end of this 5-day challenge, we had everyone on there, like, sit down with God. And first they wrote down these lies that they had acquired throughout their life of what, these bullies had said, and maybe their sexual sin had said, or, their father-in-law had said, or their dads had said, or whatever. And we started to break those lies off. And at the end, the coolest part is at the end, it's like, okay, now God's going to give you a name.
Come on.
And I want you to sit here, and I want God to. And so the power of hearing a father go, "You are my son in whom I'm well pleased," it changes everything.
Yes.
It's like as a man, to me, like, you will strive to earn money. You'll strive to obtain all this stuff simply because you're chasing that one thing. You're my son in whom I'm well pleased. And man, I just think like that is such a foundational piece for every man on the planet today is, do you know what God thinks about you?
Yes.
Are you connected to him? I heard you say on another podcast I think it was it a A.W. Tozer quote where he said, what you believe to be true about God, or who you believe to be God to be, is the most important thing that you can believe in life. Clean that quote up for me, would you?
I think it's the most important thing about us is what we believe about God.
Yes.
I believe that. Man, I love that story you referenced. It's one of my life verses, the baptism of Jesus into the wilderness. I mean, and it's literally like one sentence later, he's baptized, this is my beloved son. And a sentence later, he's in the wilderness and the enemy says, if you are the Son of God, and all of the enemy's attacks are over our belovedness. And so what Jesus, I think, for those 40 days had been feasting on, I'm the beloved. I'm the beloved. I am the beloved. So when the counterfeit was slid across the table, Jesus is like, no, it is written. This is who I am. This isn't just words I've read or a voice I've heard. This is something written on my heart. I know this to be true. He is my Father. I am his son. And that's David on the battlefield. He's like, who are you to defile the army of the living God? I have a prophecy and I have a father that has a dream and a plan for me. Like, you can't take me out. That's where his confidence was rooted in who God was for him. So for me, that quote from A.W. Tozer is probably one of the core pillars that we've built a lot of our discipleship curriculum on, is like what we believe about God is the most important thing about us. And how that would play out for me just in my own journey is if I see God to be a grumpy taskmaster, a God, I know one of the lies that I've had to tear down from my thoughts is I saw God for a lot of years like an Olympic judge. And he's just up there grading my quiet times. He's grading, you got like a 8.7 today. You kind of read the Bible, but not really. And you did this. And instead of a father like in the stands, like cheering me on, and he's going to go home and practice with me later tonight and stay out late throwing catch. And he's going to be with me at practice the next day. But I saw him for so many years as this perfectionist taskmaster who's, you don't quite have what it takes. And to have that lie, Paul says, take captive every thought that has exalted itself above the knowledge of God. And there was these lies that, like Goliath, sat above who God actually was in my mind and in my heart. And so my discipleship journey has been those lies, learning how to take those captive and replace them with, actually, this is who God is. Because I believe that the God we see is the man that will be. The God we see is the man will be. So if we see God as this perfectionist, angry, grumpy taskmaster, we'll reflect it. And I can look back at the way I parented my kids in the early part of their age, and it actually breaks my heart. Because I can see where I reflected that kind of father to my kids. I mean, I'll never forget this one moment. My daughter's unloading the dishwasher. My daughter Haven. She's the most peaceful heart. She's like 4 or 5 years old, unloading the dishwasher, and she pulls a glass out and drops it on the floor and breaks it. And my first reaction was, it wasn't anger like I hit her, but frustration came out of my heart. And not patience, not kindness, but I reacted to her mistake instead of responding to her mistake. And it was a sharp judgment. And I just remember watching her little spirit crumble. And I realized I just reacted to Haven the way that I believe God reacts to my mistakes.
Wow.
And until I learn to be kind to myself, I'm going to keep parenting my kids like this, where I'm going to parent them from my perfectionism. And so it sent me it broke my heart. But that's usually the place where transformation starts happening. And I'm like, God, I believe that's how you respond to my mistakes. Like, earlier this week when I didn't feel like I measured up in these places, I saw you up there in the stands going, nah, not quite. One day you'll get it. instead of like a father who's full of kindness towards me. And so as I begin to replace that lie with the true picture of he's a God who's slow to anger and he's quick to love, I've learned to be kind to myself, which I'm now reflecting much more kindness to my son and daughter, much more kindness to my wife, much more kindness to those around me. So if we see God to be generous, we'll reflect generosity. If we see God to be joyful, we'll reflect joyful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the process of being able to literally meditate on who God is and spending time hearing his voice and spending time like, because when I think about like, how do you go from having this view of Father God being upset and impatient, angry, and then this other view of like, I'm not enough. I don't do things well enough. I'm not I'm not pleasing to him. Like, we have to carve out some real time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way is you have to carve out, unless you have a better idea, but it feels like you have to carve out some real time in your life.
Yep.
In your everyday life to like get really present with God.
Yep.
In the midst of your successes and your failures.
Yes.
I know the one recently for me, and this is going to sound bad, but I realized recently that I have been measuring other people and assuming, like getting frustrated. Like I'll give you an example. I was at an event for our church, and we were having this one guy speak. It was a men's event, and somebody else had set it up and facilitated it. And I was like, oh man, I wish we would have had somebody speak like I wish we would have had a good speaker. Like that's just what I'm just being super honest. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Like, I wish we would have got a good speaker to speak. I hadn't even heard this guy speak yet, right? He was just one of the guys from our group. And he got up there and he started to speak and he started to share his story. And it was so crazy. And I realized, like, I've done this like the past month, I've caught myself looking at somebody and judging them and going like, I caught myself doing it today, judging somebody, then spending, a long period of time with them and realizing like, I've got these places in my heart where I judge other people and I judge me that do not line up with the heart of God.
Wow.
And the only way that I'm going to eradicate that, one, is by being super honest with myself.
Yep.
But then to allow God into those places, because it would also be my tendency to be angry at myself for, like, I want to punish myself because I judge somebody instead of like how about if I invite God into this moment and allow him to father me in this moment and allow him to care for me in this moment. But that's like a daily, like that's a real intentional daily thing that we have to do in order for it to really take root.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is part of the discipleship process, right? Like, we want things so fast, and I'm the same, but we want things so fast. We want to work through pain in 5 minutes. We want to, be a professional in a day. We want to have, success with our wives without having to really understand my wife and her really know me deep like that. We just want this stuff so quickly. Yeah. And mostly because we don't want to have to go through the process, through the pain and through the process.
Yep.
But I think too, I've been thinking a lot about there is no end point. Like in my younger years, I kept thinking like, I can't wait till I get to my 40s, until I get to this place where I'm just like, or I can't wait till I get this place financially where I can I'm trying to get to a place where I made it. I get to rest.
Right.
I get to stop. And the older I get, the more I realize all the life, all the beautiful, all the stuff that's worth it is in the journey. It's in this discipleship journey. It's in the life on life. It is, there will never be a point when I grow beyond this, needing Father God to come in and affirm me. There will never be this point where I grow beyond, having a bad day once in a while and having to go clean up a mess. That's part of the beauty of life is in this journey, in this discipleship journey. And it really is the secret to becoming, a strong, healthy, powerful man is God invited us into a life of discipleship. He invited us into a family. And you guys model it so well where you're at. And I watch those men. And so for me, I have such a desire to see men, whether they join BraveCo or whether they go work, go to your guys' school, but who are you doing life with, and who's discipling you? And are you allowing God into your day-to-day moments that are bringing you to a place of real victory in Him? There is no great secret to becoming a great man. It's in the process of doing life with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just reading yesterday in the Gospels, Jesus said, you talked about this earlier, but he said, come follow me and I will make you into fishers of men. You were this, but follow me and I'll make you into something completely different. Transformation will happen as we walk side by side, and I'll form you and make you. And you just read Peter's story, and it was Peter didn't do the master class with Jesus in 3 weeks, and then he's like, I'm the fisher of men now. It was a 3-year after 3 years of the best discipleship school any human's ever done, he completely fails the class. And then you read, he keeps screwing up so many times. The forming never stopped. It was Eugene Peterson calls it a long obedience in the same direction. And he's like, Peter, we're going to walk this road for a long time together. And the transformation is going to be more than you could ask or imagine, but it's never going to end. And even at the end of your life, you're going to open up your arms and someone else is going to clothe you. And Peter ended being crucified, the forming was still happening. And there is this lust inside of my heart. Same thing. I want to just arrive. I want to get to this place where I outgrow my need for God. And I'm that's so screwed up. I would, the greatest part of this thing called Christianity is that I need Him. But I think I've given into that, and it's that grasping, manipulative part of me that just wants control. And I think discipleship for me, I've been seeing so much recently, it happens when I dare to answer the original question that God asked man, where are you? It's the first question God ever asked a man, where are you? And Adam chose to hide behind his fig leaves of performance and religion and shame. But I believe discipleship really happens when we dare to go, this is where I actually am, God. That moment when Haven dropped the glass and I reacted, it was a moment that I could have just moved on, but I just stopped and paused and said, this is where I actually am. I am stuck in these lies about who God is. And now I'm damaging my daughter because I have a damaged view of who God actually is. And I've been damaging my own heart for a long time because I haven't actually received who God wants to be for me. another Dallas Willard quote. He says that our actions reveal our beliefs 100% of the time. 100% of the time, our actions reveal our beliefs. So I think one thing you could do right now as a man is just look back at your actions from the last week. Take an inventory and go, what do those actions reveal about my beliefs about who God is? And there could be some really positive moments you've had and some other moments of like, okay, when I freaked out when I looked at my bank statement and me and my wife got in an argument about our finances, like what was I actually believing about God in that moment? And then grab your journal and go, God, what's the instead? Who do you want to be for me and my wife in this season? Or who do you want to be for me right now in this season as a man in this part of my journey? And I think that's the really courageous part of discipleship, where Jesus is like, I'm ready to form you and make you and shape you and mold you if you'll come down here and actually dare to get dirty and honest with me and confess, this is where I actually am right now. But so many men want to pose and pretend that we got it figured out, you know? I had this moment with my son a couple days ago, and we were talking about one of the things that we get to do on the land is we get to work together a lot. And that's one of our favorite things, because that's where a lot of discipleship happens. And he was like, Dad, I remember this moment, one of the first times I was working with all the guys. He was probably 10 or 11. And one of the men told him, hey, go over to the tool shed and get this specific tool. And Cadence said he went to the tool shed. He said, I'll never forget this moment. I walked in and we have this room that's got, about 30 or 40 of our outdoor tools hanging on a wall. And he said, I realized that he asked me to get the specific tool and I had no idea what that tool was. And I stood there in front of all those tools and I felt so ashamed that I didn't know what it was. And I just wanted to pretend that I did. But I was so afraid to actually go back to them and say, I don't know what that tool is. And I was like, oh my, and he has a dad that's ready to teach him those things. And that shame, that powerlessness that you were talking about. And I think that's a picture of so many men right now. Like we know we're called to do these things and these things. And then we go and we go into the tool room and we're like, we have no idea how to be a dad, how to be a husband, how to be a brother, how to be kind, and we just, if we could dare to go, this is where I'm at. I don't know how to do this. Somebody help me. I think that's where the discipleship really starts.
To me, it has to be one of the most powerful questions I've heard in a long time, and haven't really thought about it much. Like that. Like, where are you at, Adam? Where are you? Where are you at right now in this moment? What is going on inside of you? And of course, you can hear that in a shame way, or you can hear that in a loving way of like, explain to me what's happening. I want to know you, I want to understand, but I'm also here to be with you. And one of the most challenging things in life is to know where you're at.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing in the world. It can be very hard to understand what's going on inside of me and why is it there and why do I feel the way that I feel, in working with just, I don't know, thousands of people. I have found over the years that most people don't actually even understand their story. They don't really understand what happened to them when they were young. They don't understand why they are the way that they are, how it affected them, the way that they see themselves. Like they've never pieced it all together. This thing that, and then as you know, like when you start taking someone, like one of the things we do in BraveCo is they have to map out their story.
Yes.
They have to map out their highs and their lows and what it meant to them and the effect of that, right? And oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how many times people go, I had no idea that when I was introduced to pornography at 8 years old, that shaped the rest of my life. And then they're heartbroken, right? Like they have this moment of deep sadness and like real deep sadness at how much they even judge themselves, right? They feel so much anger for all this sexual sin and all this stuff when they weren't even the originator of it. Someone came in and brought a violation, and that became where they learned to medicate, right? Somebody taught them like, hey, pornography is a great way to whatever, fix your anxiety or fix the pain of living in this home. And you don't realize what happens in your brain when you get addicted at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and how that shapes the rest of your life, right? And we're not necessarily talking about all that sexual sin or whatever, but most people walking around have a very, very limited view of where they're at, why they are where they're at, how they got there. And it is one of the most important things that you can do, right? Is to sit in the moment and go, why are you here? What are you feeling? Where are you at? What's going on inside of you? And then being able to sit in that with God. Here's what I've seen happen a lot in the church is we come to God like we come to our friends with like our Sunday best on, the poser.
Yeah.
I need to please God.
Yeah.
That's typically the thought, right? Like I want God to be pleased with me. So I don't want to come to him with this like, hey, I feel like a piece of crap today. And I feel a lot of shame. And I feel, heartbroken and whatever. And so, but then we wonder why don't I like myself? And why don't I feel comfortable in my shoes?
Yeah.
And why don't I feel like a powerful man? Probably probably 6 years ago, I finally realized like I'm carrying so much shame around. Like I hated my job. I didn't feel motivated. I didn't feel like I hated it. I didn't like doing it. And there's shame around that, right? I'm a pastor and I'm supposed to be helping people and it's a blessing. And then I felt really wore out, and I didn't like going to work every day. But then coming home too, I started feeling pretty inadequate in different areas of my life as a husband. And little things, right? Like my wife would be like, hey, you forgot to take the garbage out. Can you take the garbage out? And hey, you forgot. And I realized like at some point I'm walking around most days just carrying shame. I just feel, I feel so much shame over how I feel about work right now and my lack of motivation. And then my lack of discipline, really, not necessarily my lack of motivation, my lack of discipline. And then when I get home, I'm not really showing up for my wife at home.
Wow.
And then at some point I had I remember making a decision. I was in the garage and I realized like, I have to start telling my wife about the shame that I'm carrying.
Yeah.
Because it's not going away. It's starting to define who I am, right? Like it's starting to hurt my marriage. And of course the opposite happens of what you think is going to happen, right? Like I want to hide my shame. I don't want to tell God that I feel a bunch of shame. I don't want to tell my wife that I feel a bunch of shame because I want her to see me as this powerful, confident man that doesn't need her, but can do everything, whatever. But that was the first part of me conquering that stuff in my life is just admitting it, right? I don't know how to get out of it. I don't know what the answer is, but I feel a lot of shame. And I remember saying that statement a lot in that season. I feel a lot of shame right now.
Wow.
And that became my go-to, right? Like if my wife and I were in the middle of a conversation and I felt whatever, I just started to be really honest with her and be like, not in self-pity, because there's that side, like I feel a lot of shame. Like I wasn't looking here for her pity. I actually was looking to go like, hey, this is what I feel. I don't want to feel like this, but this is why this is why I'm operating like I am right now. Wow, I feel a lot of shame. Now I need to go repent from that, right? Like I need to, so that was the second step is like, I can't keep breaking promises to myself.
Right.
I can't keep going through life and just, because it's easy to get stuck in that rut too. Like I'm admitting that I feel shame or anger or pain, but then I just don't do anything about it. I try I feel good that I admitted it. And so I just stay there. But going to the next part where it's like, okay, you feel shame, you feel pain. What are you going to do? Who are you going to invite into your life to start pulling you out of that, or what actions are you going to take in your life to start moving you from point A to point B? And I just think that for me, that was one of the big breakthroughs that came, especially in the knowing myself and getting from a place of real shame to like, I think overcoming that shame and then feeling proud, a sense of like, man, I did something that was really, truly was courageous and was hard to do. And it paid off, right? It worked. I pulled my wife into this moment with me.
Wow. That's so good, Jason.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Johnny, would you pray for us? We're gonna close here, but you have such a incredible grace on your life to connect with God and to bring God into your story, and you just have such a great way to really encounter the love of God. I'm just wondering if you can pray and invite God to do that to the men who are listening to our podcast today.
Yes. So wherever you're at, if you're driving or you're working, wherever you're listening to this podcast, however you can, I challenge you right now to somehow press pause, to slow down a little bit and take a deep breath. Breathe in the breath of God. Your dependency is your honor. It's not your shame. From the first moment God fashioned Adam in the garden, he was dependent on God's breath. He had a need from the first moment he was formed. Neediness is not shame. Neediness is your honor. So slow down a little bit more and breathe in the breath of God that's all around you. And I declare over your heart right now as you're listening to this conversation that me and Jason have been having. I speak over your heart the words that Jesus heard in those Jordan waters. You are a beloved Son in whom the Father is well pleased. You are a beloved Son in whom the Father's heart can't stop erupting with joy each morning when he sees you. You are a beloved Son. And George MacDonald said, now that we are the sons of God, let us become the sons of God. So I ask right now that the Father would activate something deep inside of your heart, like that fire that was lit in David's heart, to become the man that he was born to be, that you would rise up from wherever you're at, even the paralyzation of fear and pity and lust and all those prisons, that as you hear the voice of the Father ringing over you, that something would wake up in a deeper way to arise and become the man that God dreamed you to be. And this whole podcast, I keep hearing the Spirit speaking those words from Psalm 139. And it says that even in our mother's womb, God knew us. He knit us together in that place. And I declare that God, you knew me before the foundations of the world. You know every part of me, even before words on my tongue. Before I even think a thought, you knew it. And at the end of Psalm 139, David prays, search me and know me, God. And I think when David prayed that, God's heart was so ravished. It's what he was longing for Adam to say when he said, where are you? Here I am, God. Search me, know me, come help me. I don't know what I've done. And so I just charge you, wherever you're at listening to this, to make David's prayer your prayer. Search me and know me, God. Wherever you're at in your life, if you feel powerless, inadequate, I just dare you, charge you to pray it. Search me, God, and know me. Search me, God, and know me. So I bless each one of you as you listen to become the man the Father dreams you to be, to dare to get beautifully, brutally honest and say, God, this is where I actually am. May your face shine on us, Father. Thank you that it's your good pleasure to take us from glory to glory. We say yes and amen. Amen.
Amen. Johnny, thank you so much for coming on here and
such an honor
sharing your life. And gosh, I just love you guys so much.
Yeah, we love you, and we love what BraveCo's doing. That you guys, just all the resources I've been digging in. It's just such incredible stuff. I wish I had this stuff in my 20s and 30s. So you guys are just putting out incredible stuff. I'm so thankful for what you're doing, Jason. And we're just here cheering you guys on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yes.
All right, BraveCo men, have an incredible week. Stay brave out there. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.